So I'd like to call the September 14th Whatcom County PUD regular meeting to order. It's 8 o'clock. And we're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance first. And Christina, are you feeling up for that? Were you next or was it me?
I can do it. I just was
Okay.
muted. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So let's talk about the agenda for today. I think Steve, you asked for an adjustment.
Yes, I'm requesting that we move the California Creek item to after the executive session.
It's currently listed as a comment on the general manager report. Would you still be able to make a brief comment on it before we go into executive session, and then we'll have it as actually a action item after 10?
That's fine, Commissioner. Yes, good idea. Yes.
Okay. So can someone make a motion to add California Creek action after item number 10? Commissioner Murphy.
Yes, I'll make a motion to change the agenda to read California Creek, that's in item 7 down to making it item 11, and possibly 12 would be an action before we adjourn.
Is there a second for that?
I'll second that.
Great, thank you. Are there any further changes to the agenda?
None for me.
Okay, and would everybody feel comfortable if we just vote to approve the change in the agenda all at once? Great. So all those in favor of the agenda as amended, please signify by saying aye.
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 So the motion carries. So we've added one new item after the executive session to vote, probably relating to the California Creek Grant Agreement. So let's move on to the consent agenda. There's 2 minutes we're approving, August 10th, August 24th, as well as the claims of September 14th.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Great. There's a motion, a second. Is there further discussion on the items on the consent agenda? Okay, with no further discussion, please signify your approval of the consent agenda by saying aye.
Aye.
And the motion carries. Next, we have on our agenda public comment. Rebecca, would you be able to facilitate, look for the raised hands and then identify and allow those people to speak?
Yes, I don't see anyone in the attendees that wish to speak at this time. Well, let me check the panelists. I have no raised hands.
Great. We'll close the public comment period. Let's move on to old business. So first is the general manager appointment process update. John, could you?
I think I just say it's ongoing, where we were told, I think it's 11 candidates have submitted. I was contacted by a potential candidate, had a nice 20-minute conversation about the PUD and directed them to the strategic initiatives. I think that potential candidate is going to be reaching out to Steve. And there'll be some follow-up on how to do interviews and try to get a consistency of methodology of interviews so that there's some structure and organization of how we approach that. Commissioner Grant's passed along some great ideas, and I'll be coordinating that with Prothman later this week. There is, we have asked Prothman, and I'll continue to monitor this, but there is a WPUDA meeting coming up virtual next week. And we're trying to get the list of attendees so that if any of the applicants are also attendees, it'll be an opportunity for you to quietly see them in action if that's the case. So we checked yesterday and he didn't see any applicants on the list of attendees, but we had thought there would be 1 or 2 applicants that would likely be in attendance. So we'll keep monitoring that. And if that comes about, we'll let you know.
Great, Commissioner Murphy.
Thank you. To John,
Actually, Commissioner Grant, you were next, but I apologize.
Mike can go first.
Yeah, but I wanted to acknowledge that. Sorry.
Thank you. I'll go next.
John, what are we as commissioners going to be able to see those parties that are interested so we can get a little background on them, even though they might not be in the final interview?
Well, we can get a list of all of those candidates and then be involved with the screening. I think we'll get a recommendation of who Prothman thinks is the viable candidates on your criteria, but we can certainly get the whole list so we can screen if you want to move any up or down. This is your process, not theirs.
I would be interested in knowing who they are and some background on them so that at least maybe there's something we'll spot that no one else will, and we can open up and share.
Absolutely, absolutely, and fair comment. I have not asked for who the list of candidates are because it's still open. I didn't want to start piecemealing it in and put more work on Prothman or trying to screen a list when we don't have a complete list. So once that we get to the end of the deadline, which is I think end of next week, if I recall, then I'll ask for the complete package of candidates and we'll go work with Prothman and you, the commission, to get a screening. I'll probably send out the list individually and ask for your individual feedback unless you want a special meeting to review this.
Thank you, John.
Grant,
If it's the end of next week, we'll probably be, timed for your following commission meeting. So.
Yeah, I would be interested in seeing the whole list too. And I'd say also, I know at one point there was this idea that they would screen out, certain candidates and we'd only get binders with the top candidates. But I think given the number of candidates, I wouldn't mind seeing everyone that applied.
Totally understandable. So
just to kind of get the whole lay of the land. And then I also wanted to ask you, John, I know that we're kind of emailing a little bit about, I have done some thinking on kind of the interview process and wanted to share those ideas with Prothman, but are we expecting them to give us a memo or come to for a future commission meeting to walk us through the process from September 27th through selection so that we can, all 3 of us can kind of shape what that process is going to look like? Or
I think that's a reasonable approach, and we haven't scheduled that out yet. But why don't I try to do that for what would be the last meeting of the month? Day is it today? Or probably the 28th, so we can try to schedule.
Okay. Yeah, I think that would be good so that maybe they could spend some time thinking through. Okay, here's what it's going to look like. And then we can ask questions and make modifications if it doesn't sit right with us.
Yes, I think that's reasonable. And I would just tell you, Commissioner, that Bill McDonald did not find the book. I thought it was named Who. So if you could send me the author's name, he tried to find it, he was going to read that.
Okay.
And then you had some particular questions that I was kind of being the intermediary on, and he's open to meeting having a conversation with you directly.
Okay.
About some.
I can give him. I can work on that with you.
I'll send. Also, you'll see some invitation or introduction emails and try to work through that. And if any other commissioner wants to have a conversation in the interim, that's fine. But I think we'll try to set something up for the 28th, outline the next steps. That's a good approach.
Thank you.
Commissioner Murphy.
Yeah, Altua, Christine, and John, Steve. But Altua and Christine, what do you think about us having a special meeting? I don't know if we could do it executive, about having an introduction made to us about all the candidates, even though they may pick 3 or 4 or whatever number but it'd be nice to be in a room with the 2 of you and we all hear the same story about who these candidates are, because we might pick up on something that we might be more interested in for our organization than Prothman might pick up. I don't know. John?
I'll explore setting that up and try to set that up, find a date and possibly the intervening meeting Tuesday and set something up. I would say the conversation that Christine was speaking of that I was arranging wasn't to review candidates, outside of the other commissioners. It was to talk about the interviewing process. There's different theories of interviewing candidates for a job. And I think Commissioner Grant wanted to speak to Prothman about what their theory and approach was and understand that.
Well, and I think it's also going to be complex because all three of us are going to want to interview the candidates because of not all of the candidates are going to feel comfortable doing it in an open public meeting. In fact, most of them won't. So I think it's going to be an interview process unlike one that I've been a part of so far in my career. So I'm just curious about but I agree with you, Mike. I think as much as possible, I would love all three of us to be doing things at the same time, if nothing else, because it helps us just be a lot more efficient. But I think the only thing that's challenging with that is that it triggers open public meetings. And I think candidates, especially, candidates might not be comfortable with that, which I completely understand.
So, and Juan and I'll work with Prothman and set up that schedule, get a meeting together, possibly executive session or open session if necessary, and talk about process, get us all aligned, get a full list of all the candidates, and maybe have their binders available at the PUD offices for you to come look at. If we can easily distribute those electronically, we do that, and then work on the next steps and have that reviewed at the next commission meeting.
Thank you, John.
Commissioners and John, one of the things that I know that there's a high level of interest on behalf of staff to find an opportunity to be engaged in the process too. So I would just ask, as you all move forward with Prothman, that you identify an opportunity for staff engagement. That's all.
Yeah, I think that was part of the program. Initially, it was to have some interaction with staff for the finalist candidates, not say that 11 submitters, but those finalists that you identify. I would just say that I think under the Open Meetings Act, we can hold an executive session to have you interview a candidate as a group because we're allowed to evaluate qualifications for public employment. I wouldn't do that with the 11 submissions. I think when you get to finalists, that's the time to do an executive session to interview individual candidates. And that probably, as Commissioner Murphy noted, is probably most efficient at a special meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So if I may, Commissioner Murphy, I just wanted to support this idea of doing some kind of a work session with Prothman. I think that would be beneficial, whether it occurs at a regular commission meeting or a special meeting. Maybe we can figure out, Steve, where there's room for it if we need a special meeting. I think I would support that. And so the other thing is that we have to recognize that with now COVID restrictions happening again, it's going to present some unique challenges in the process, reducing the likelihood of early in-person meetings. So it's just something else to think through, a factor that might influence the process. And then the other thing I wanted to bring up was I can see how candidates wouldn't want to have information about the fact that they're applying, public information, and an agenda packet for a special meeting or a regular meeting is public information. So I would respect the desire of our consultant to just list candidate 1, candidate 2, or something like that instead of.
Right. When we submit an agenda, we don't have to list the candidates that are evaluating an applicant for public employment. We can just say applicant A, B, and C. We can provide you confidentially, through my office, those candidates. If someone filed a public records request, we have to cross that bridge. But Typically, it's not very often that someone goes through files of public request during an interview process to find out who was a candidate.
Yeah, we're just trying to be sensitive to.
I totally appreciate that. I understand that. Good comment.
Commissioner Murphy, you had a comment.
Yeah, thank you, Altul. Steve, we always talk about staff, but is the crew, the union, going to have a representative to interview too, or meet the candidates?
You know, we haven't gone to that extent in terms of, trying to determine that. I think that over the next, couple of weeks, working with John and with Prothman, I think that we'll, try to identify what best works. I'm not expecting, or I would expect that, that we just want to have an open forum with, any employee that wants to come. So we'll just work with John and with Prothman and with you all to determine that what's the best approach. I would assume that when you get down to the whatever that number is, the final 3 or 5 that you'll want to actually interview, I think that's when we'll figure out how to best meet and greet and set up a series of hopefully in-person opportunities. So, but we haven't sat down with staff yet to plan that out.
And John, just one last comment for me is just that for me, what would be most helpful is if they could send us some sort of a memo a few days in advance of our meeting on September 28th that kind of outlines it so that we have time to process it and they're not just presenting in the meeting. And I know they didn't end up doing very many staff interviews because Jim Darling did it, but this might be an opportunity to reach out to staff and understand how they best, how they would feel, kind of what preferences they might have in terms of being involved. So yeah, I'd love to get it kind of in writing a few days before and then have their presence in the commission meeting really be more of a time for a discussion rather than a presentation. That's just my preference. But
Totally understand and appreciate that. And that was my intent, to try to have them provide us a outline or memo of what the next process is going to be, what they have conceptually, and so that we can have a discussion, not, as you say, a presentation at the 28th. And I'll shoot out an email to Prothman today on this and for that draft, hopefully by the end of this week, the first of next, so I can look at it before it gets finalized. And then Christine, I'll also try to coordinate your interaction with him, with Bill McDonald, so you can have that conversation. I encourage you to convey any thoughts or comments you have during that conversation.
okay, great. I'll follow up on that email after the meeting today.
And I say that just to assure the commission, I'm not trying to be a gatekeeper here. I'm just trying to be a facilitator here.
Oh, I think you're doing a great job. I really appreciate it, John. Thanks.
Great. Well, so is there further discussion on the general manager appointment process? Great. Well, let's move on to the second item in old business, which is the broadband program update. So I was thinking that Commissioner Grant and I would both give updates on our intervening meetings. I can go first by just talking about the city's advisory group meeting.
Go for it.
The main focus of the meeting was a presentation and discussion by Magellan Partners, who has been selected by staff as the contractor for supporting the advisory committee over the next several months in producing recommendations to the city council for the city's role in expanding fiber optic infrastructure to support broadband expansion in the city. That presentation perhaps will to some degree of note to me and a little bit surprising to me was how much the scope what they are proposing as their initial scope of work is a citywide assessment of existing infrastructure, the demand from the market and the unmet demand, either for affordability or other service reasons. So very similar to the kind of mapping exercise that I'm hoping we're able to do on a countywide basis. So Magellan seems to see very eye to eye, well, with me in particular, as it relates to what needs to happen first. It's going to take a couple of months to do that. There's going to be additional discussion on the topic, and I'm hopeful that city's map is very informative to us all countywide as well. That's my update.
Can I ask a question, O'Toole?
Yes.
How does that relate to what the port and the PUD is doing countywide? How's that going to fit in the city of Bellingham's advisory committee?
I don't know, but I believe that's a great question to ask Commissioner Grant.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Well, I don't have all the answers, but I have some thoughts on that. There's a lot going on with the Port PUD steering committee. I would just want to say, first of all, it's really great having Chris Walker on the team. Really appreciate having his deep technical knowledge in the meetings, and also his ability to follow up and do work in between meetings. It's great having staff on this initiative that we all care so much about. I'd say the first thing is that, we've talked about the port has a committed funding from CURB, so $2 million from CURB, and then EDI, the EDI funds were about $2 million too. And there's been just a lot of pivoting, right, in terms of where that money is going to go, whether it's broad backbone or what the state broadband office has been pushing more is we really need to get the last mile infrastructure put in so that homes are actually connected to the internet after we spend this money. And so there have been a few different iterations of what a first project could be. And I think we finally landed on where we're going to try to start, which is on Mosquito Lake Road and in kind of the Nooksack area. So there's 650 homes roughly out there that are extremely underserved. Most of them are still on DSL and very, especially Mosquito Lake Road. I think the socioeconomic situation is challenging out there. So that would be kind of an initial project in partnership with Pogo Zone. And so that would end up being, I think, about $4,000 per home to get fiber to the home in those areas. And so this would be setting up the open access network where we would eventually try to attract multiple ISPs to use that infrastructure. So that's really exciting that I think we actually have a project that we're ready to really move forward on. We also agreed on mission and goals for what the PUD and the Port Steering Committee are working on. And those will be posted on the Port's website. And I think Steve's going to work on getting them on the PUD website also. And I think the highlights of that are just really that we're focused on fiber as infrastructure. We're focused on deploying infrastructure as quickly as possible and creating competition to keep rates low for everyone. The next thing that I got on the agenda for our last meeting was a public ISP feasibility study. There's obviously, we would love to build open access networks and have lots of ISPs want to be on them, but there's a chance that we will build open access networks and there'll only be one ISP, or maybe, maybe we won't even have any ISPs on them. And so we're talking, and Steve forwarded some scope of work related to this, but we want to start looking into what it would be, what it would take to create a public ISP, what the business model for that would be. And there was even some interesting discussion too about collaborating with, well, just how we can do that in a way that that makes sense financially. So I think Steve, forwarded a lot of what Chris Walker put together in terms of scope of work for the work that he's doing. And we're also hoping to get curb funding to pay for quite a bit of that work, which is what the September 27th deadline is when we're hoping to get that application in. So a lot of progress. I also met with Representative Shoemake. The state broadband office has $400 million that they've had for a while, and they haven't talked at all about what that funding is for. And within our steering committee group, there was some concerns about, what is that money going to be used for? When are we going to find out how we might be able to access it? So had a good discussion with her. And the state broadband office also has a new director as of just a few days ago. So Russ Elliott has moved to California. And there's, I think the deputy director now is the acting executive director. And just looking at her bio a little bit, it sounds like she's really focused on supporting lower income communities and things like that. So I'm excited to get to know her. But yeah, it feels like we're making some momentum, positive steps forward. I'd say back to your question, Commissioner Murphy, about collaborating with the city. I spoke briefly with City Council member Michael Lilliquist, and he would really like to make sure that we're coordinating with the city. So Steve, I just had that conversation yesterday, but he is interested in getting one of their staff members talking to Chris Walker so that we're synced up on the work that we're doing and are looking for opportunities to collaborate. So it's a 10,000 piece puzzle and it's kind of always moving, but I think we're getting sections of it put together. And I think the really exciting thing too is that project out on Mosquito Lake Road that we're actually going to start, hopefully getting some infrastructure built soon for the people that need it most out in the county. So that's what I've got right now. Yeah.
Commissioner Murphy.
Yeah, thank you all too. Christine, thanks for the update. I will be sharing this information with others. However, the area that's contacting me is Ferndale to Blank to Sumas, that triangle area.
Yeah.
They're not going to be too happy about my report because they're going to say, why Mosquito Lake Road? That's a long ways out past Deming. I take it that Deming must be fiber at this time. Is that true? And they're just going to go off that because it's close?
Well, okay. There's a lot of different, so there's these areas called RDOF areas. Steve Atul, what does RDOF stand for again?
Rural development, something.
So there are areas all across the country and in Whatcom County that are RDOF areas, which means that private internet service providers got funding to improve their broadband infrastructure, and public entities are not supposed to play in that area, is basically my understanding. So there's like these circles of RDOF areas where we're not supposed to be identifying projects. Is that, and so there's kind of like this patchwork of areas where it makes sense for us to use our CURB and EDI funding. And then on top of that, we really wanted to focus on areas that had the most need. So once we sort of layered those things on top of each other, we felt like the Mosquito Lake Road was the most important area. The other thing, I didn't want to go on and on and on, but there is also this very strong desire that we have a overall plan for Whatcom County, because we understand that once we say, oh, we're going to Mosquito Lake Road, everyone's going to say, well, what about me? For me, in my district, Lake Samish area has just terrible internet, and I hear from those folks. So we also need to really think through our policies for, this is why we selected this area. This is our plan for when we're going to other places. Talking to Representative Shoemake too, you know, she was talking about the benefit possibly using tax increment financing to help get, if there's an area that's really motivated to get fiber now, how do we potentially use that? So we have a lot more work to do for what the overall Whatcom County broadband plan is. And I think we are just now, I think, even barely scratching the surface of having the appropriate staffing levels for getting this work done is my feeling. But I would say that that's something we really need to work on, is after Mosquito Lake Road, what is our plan for these other areas? What do we tell other parts of the community about when they're next? And a big part of that comes back to financing. What's our plan for financing the rest of the infrastructure build? Steve?
RDOF stands for RDOF stands for Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. Thank you for.
Okay, yeah. There's the acronym soup in this world is real. There's a lot of acronyms. Did I miss anything, Steve, from your perspective in terms of?
No, I think that, Christine, I think you said it well. I think the other is that, you know, the port, in trying to develop a overall county-wide plan, came up with, you know, initially came up with 4 segments, starting with that East County area down, you know, from Deming down to Acme and then out to Glacier. And then if you would, a counterclockwise, more or less circled around and identified an area, you know, around Sumas, Linden, and then over by Ferndale, you know, Cherry Point down to Delineation, and then south to include areas south of Bellingham, basically. And initially they had identified, you know, each of those 4 segments and then prioritized those segments, starting out with what I think Christine accurately described as the area of most need, partially because of the majority of those areas, or that area being totally unserved. And then looking at opportunities for doing, I'll call it more focused, you know, segments, like from Deming to Glacier. That was their first attempt. But then when they started looking at it in terms of where they thought the most need was based upon income levels and a number of areas not served related to schools, you know, school population, students not being served. I think that this is where they now have come back to identify that Mosquito Lake Road areas as the #1 priority, not only based upon what they can accomplish, but based upon where, you know, a project that they can fund and get infrastructure in the ground and get service to the homes. They also identified an area around Nooksack, Everson, that South Pass area, north and east of Everson, Nooksack as the next piece. I think the other thing that one of the reasons that we reached out to Chris Walker and NOAANET to try to help develop a more robust business plan approach to the entire county was that, and I think Christine mentioned it at your previous meeting, is that we're still, you know, the port has really become more and more aggressive in terms of, let's get this project built, let's get some services to the homes and businesses, and I think that the PUD is still trying to really figure out what benefit we can bring to the partnership working with the port. And I think that when we had some discussion with Chris Walker at NOAANET, you know, he quickly identified an opportunity for them, for NOAANET, through funding, through CURB, to develop a much more robust business plan approach countywide, not getting in front of or causing the port to pause on their work, but really help us work as a partner with the port in looking countywide. That work, if we proceed with knowing that, if we get funding from CURB to do, I'll just call it the plan, will help identify those areas that we and the port can really focus on, and not simply look at picking out, piecemeal where we can, get 160 homes here or 120 homes there. The other thing that I think that knowing that their work will really help identify some of the elements of that have been missing in terms of what happens when that fiber gets laid or hung and we get service to the home, who's going to operate it, who's going to maintain it. And then also looking at, as Commissioner Grant brought up, is there an opportunity and a benefit to consider, a public ISP? So that's a long-winded answer, but I think that, working with knowing that we'll be able to provide a better answer to the community as to what the PUD can really bring to the table. So. And I think that Commissioner Deshmani, when you mentioned that the city of Bellingham hired Magellan, or decided to hire Magellan, and Commissioner Grant indicating she had talked to Council Member Lilliquist, I think this is a great opportunity for bringing NOAANET and Magellan together, and because one of the questions that Chris Walker asked me about was if we get CURB funding to do a countywide look, if you would, should we include the city of Bellingham area, and I think that if we would have, or if we would, and if the city of Bellingham would not be proceeding to do similar work, it would have increased the cost for us significantly, because you look at potential customer base and so forth. And I think that if we get NOAANET and Magellan together, I think it would really create a great synergy for all of the county.
So, I'm still steadfast in what I've been talking about for 2 years, and we still haven't made it a priority at the county level. And so I'm steadfast not because I expect it to be good news. And in fact, it's probably not the best news to tell everybody in the community how big the gaps are. But the reason that I think it's important, and it's still not receiving priority at the county level, is perhaps the same reason, because it takes work to identify what those gaps are, and those gaps tell you things you really don't want to know. But I feel like part of how the PUD, being a public entity, can serve the community is by exposing those gaps. And one of the best ways to encourage beneficial action for the community is to show where the problems lie. The public doesn't have to do all the investing. The private sector can absolutely be doing the investing or be accessing direct funds, as in the case of RDOF from the federal government, which is the prerogative. It's the way telecommunications law works in this country. Everything that happens in this county does not have to receive local level approval. Private telecoms can work directly with the federal government to invest and build infrastructure, and actually prohibit the public's local government from taking certain actions because of an established base. So for these reasons, I still think it's important for us to undertake the work, and it will always be. The second thing, let's all remember that the public is new, at least in our community, in Whatcom County, to even the idea of providing fiber and broadband service at the backbone level or at the retail level. And there is understandably some lay of the land type of work that needs to happen. And that's not so much an entire business plan. It's the first part of a business plan, which is the assessment of the I was going to say market assessment, but I don't like that term exactly because we're not wanting to treat everybody like a consumer. But the same basic.
Atul, did you take a look at the scope of work that Chris Walker put together that Steve forwarded a few days ago?
I haven't looked at that email from a few days ago. No.
Okay, I think you should take a look at that because I think Chris is dedicated to the same things you're talking about. And so take a look at that scope of work. And I think if you feel like he's missing things, please talk to Steve and add those things. But I think he shares your belief that we need to, understand the gaps and define the problem. So I'm hopeful that through that work, we can start moving it forward, even while the port's, so take a look at the scope of work.
Great. I will look more closely at that. I did see the email, but
Okay.
I didn't in depth. And to the degree that you can, and the degree that it makes sense to you, please try to convey that message to the steering committee.
I think there's a strong feeling of this need for, I think that we want a comprehensive plan. It's a little bit like whack-a-mole though, with the grants coming in, and there's a lot on Gina's plate. So I think that that's why I think having some extra support like from Chris is helpful. So, yeah, let us, interested in your feedback on the scope of work, Atul, and we're going to keep pushing along.
Great.
On our end. Yeah.
Is there any further discussion under the broadband program update? Great. Let's move on to new business. The first item, is that going to be Dave or you, Steve?
I'll kick it off, Commissioner Desmani, and then I'd ask Dave, and if I see we have Kurt Stonefelter on this morning to also, and if Kurt wants to add anything. But today is a very important step in moving our water system plan to the state for consideration. This has been a long process, and I would just throw out kudos to Dave and to Kurt and to our staff that they've been working with over the last several months. For most water systems and even some of the water districts in the county, this would be a fairly straightforward, simple task to update their water system plans. But as we've discussed over the last several months, for us, we're a bit unique in terms of the timing to get this completed as it relates to other issues that are going on the state level and now in the Nooksack Basin in terms of adjudication. And also because we only operate, a couple of very small potable water systems, but we are a countywide PUD, and what is reflected in our water system plan does have a significant, or could have a significant impact on how we can serve other areas in the county, not just with potable water, but also with non-potable. So today, what we're asking the commission to consider is adopting Resolution 799, which actually approves or adopts the district's water system plan update. And at that, concluding that, we will then have the opportunity to send it off to state agencies for consideration. And later in the year, hopefully, we'll be back to you for final approval, depending on what comments and issues that we get back from the reviewing agencies. So with that, Dave, if you want to just take a couple minutes and make any comments, and Kurt, also, if you have anything to add, please do so.
No, thank you, Steve. Thank you to PUD and staff. This has been an interesting adventure just because of all the unique pieces here. But I'm really proud of the work that we've done with staff and Kurt. And I think the takeaway from all of this is just simply that this sets the stage and puts into the commissioner's authority to, I think authority is the wrong word, it puts it into the commissioner's purview that they're able to take and launch from here, because you have the, I'll say, the blessing of the various agencies for the document that you put forward. So it gives you the opportunity to have discussions, meet with clients and customers and potential developers and the Cherry Point and all these other areas for you to be able to take action and move forward, having created this framework. So I think we should be really proud of that. And I'm really encouraged that whether it's the distraction of COVID or just the work that the team put together, I'm not aware of any comments, and Steve could correct that, on the water system plan. And that is quite strange. There's always some group or somebody that really wants to have input on guiding the framework. And so I think in the broad picture, that was pretty encouraging. Nothing from Ferndale being able to work with them directly or the other adjacent purveyors. So I take that as them feeling comfortable with the direction or positive feedback in a sense. So I think that's it. And we look forward to the next couple of months responding to any PUD and agency and our various agency comments. So I'll just give that back to you unless Kurt has anything in there. We're just excited to move this through to the conclusion.
Yeah, I don't have anything substantial to add. Just would ditto what Dave said and give particular kudos to Steve and Dave for really driving this thing and also working with the staff. Everybody did a great job, so thank you.
Well, the only thing I would add is Dave already mentioned it, but not getting any comments. We have to complete a SEPA checklist. We did that. We, as a SEPA official, I made a determination of issuing a DNS on the project or on the plan, and we only received one comment from one of the tribes in the county, no other agencies, and the only comment that we received from the Lummi Nation was they decided not to make any comments at this time. So I think that is pretty significant in terms of the environment that we are, all of the public agencies in the county are still are living with now, in terms of water rights and water supply issues. So, but again, I think that we can recognize, especially Dave and Kurt, having relationships with some of these other agencies and reaching out early on, making sure that they were communicating with all the public agencies in the county. I think this is just a reflection of that. So thanks again to Dave and Kurt on that.
Commissioner Murphy.
Thank you. Dave, as I look over and read the plan, why is there only selected people involved in this? As I read the whole thing, I really thought it was a county-wide involvement, and yet I see none of the smaller cities, nor the city of Bellingham being contacted, or at least being made aware of what's going on.
So I think there's two basic points to that, Mike. First of all is that the water system plan with all the state requirements and the WAC 246, 290. The focus is on your service area. And so it would be those within your service area that were directly contacted. And then the other part of that component in the code is that you're communicating other than agencies, which is Whatcom County, of course, and Department of Ecology and Department of Health. Other than that, you communicate with adjacent purveyors, those people that were your neighbors. And so we directly communicated with all of those. And so I would say that we have followed the guidelines for preparing the plan. I don't think there was any direction to, rub elbows with your, community cousins like Bellingham. That would be a long ways away in this plan, because again, we're focused on the potable water portions, which you have a duty to provide. And so we didn't have any directive to go beyond the scope of work in the water system plan. That said, all of those entities had the opportunity to look at your plan and comment on it because of the broad publication of that. But I think within the scope of work of the water system plan, that was not part of that. I think that would be my personal assessment of the process. And that's consistent with, other water system planning process.
And
Dave, I would add, if I could, the SEPA determination, which references this document, went to Birch Bay Water and Sewer District, the Lummi Tribe, the Lummi Nation, the City of Ferndale, Whatcom County Planning, Whatcom County Public Works, as well as State Fish and Wildlife and the State Department of Ecology, and was published on the SEPA register that most governments receive notice of through a listserv.
My only concern, Dave, or John, Steve, is that, years ago when I ran for PUD commissioner, I was trying to look for information on drinking water and no one agency could give it to me, or at least they wouldn't share it. Maybe they had it. Being a PUD commissioner, I've always felt that we're here to serve the people. And I always wanted everyone in Whatcom County for us to be a service to them, or at least keep them informed, or be a resource for information. So I'm just saying, I appreciate what you've done. It's great. Both you and Kurt have done. I just felt that as the PUD moves forward on plans, that we share it with everyone, so nobody questions what the PUD is doing. We're as open as we can be and sharing information, and depends on the future of the PUD where we go. We might be walking into one of these other cities one day, Linden, Sumas, Blaine, and this will be our drinking plan if we ever do it. So I just thought it should be something that we should openly share with everyone. That was it.
Dave, Commissioner Murphy, I appreciate that. Dave, do you want to just mention and talk about, one of the steps that will hopefully succeed, this action today, it will eventually end up going to Whatcom County Council for consideration for their coordinated water system plan, which really is an opportunity for all water purveyors in Whatcom County to be, I guess, engaged in. And so, beyond the SEPA checklist and the SEPA publication and putting it on our website, and, reaching out to all, as Dave said, adjacent or nearby agencies, I don't know what other process that we would be able to use successfully, that would give an opportunity for the community to really know what's going on. So
I would concur with Steve. There will be once the water system plan is approved by all of the agencies, and your final approval, you'll be submitting it to Whatcom County Council, and they will be reviewing, and it's more of a formality, but there's obviously the opportunity for public input, and as well as other agencies there, and they would be adopting it into your county-wide coordinated water system plan. So that will be an exposure to the broad community, which would include Bellingham. So from that point, as a public Whatcom County, I would agree with Steve. That would be the other opportunity. I would just note that this is a pivotal piece in you being able to help other entities in Whatcom County. With an approved water system plan, you open a lot of doors for funding opportunities. Your pilot program that you originally had that was funded by Department of Health, which you sponsor as an ongoing basis. The adjacent purveyors that are requesting help and have had for a couple of years, there were no feasibility study grants available under the terms of those grants in order to look at how the PUD can help with water supply to a couple of, we've talked about Double L and Fairfield. So those, you couldn't apply for the funding until you had a water system plan on as a check mark. And so this was a step that direction. We're now essentially county-wide for just simply that funding. You could have feasibility studies, which are generally 100% funded, as well as consolidation funding opportunities, which are typically 50-50. Those become available as part of this because it is a water system plan where you've designated your overall service area boundary as Whatcom County. And so this really sets the stage and the framework for a lot of some of the things that you're talking about, Mike. Although there's nobody knocking on your door other than those two today, I believe it sets the framework and the foundation for some of those Department of Health funding opportunities.
I just also wanted to say, I don't know, I don't look at the PUD website all that often, but just wanted to draw your attention to the fact that there is a post on our website, Mike, about this process and the water system plan update and the SEPA notice and all that. So just, yeah, appreciate that we got that on our website also so that folks can get that information there. And I'm guessing that will stay on our website, right? Yeah.
I'll make
Okay.
a motion, we approve resolution 799.
I will second.
There's a motion, a second. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of resolution number 799, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you, and the motion carries. We move on to B, which is resolution 800, the cross connection control policy.
Dave, I'm going to ask you to chime in on this one, if you would. I can read it, but you can explain it.
No, well, I was very careful to take Steve's guidance, which is plan for 30 minutes, prepare for 10, and deliver in 2 minutes. So that's my guiding. Yeah, he might like that. So in the water system plan, I'll just, for the record, give you just a couple of references. In the water system plan, section 6.7, there are 4 paragraphs about your cross connection control program. And I'll give you a definition of what that is in two official sentences here. From there, in your water system plan, you have a 66-page water system or a cross connection control program in an appendice. So it's as long as your body of your water system plan. And it simply is the guiding document that staff would use for working with that program. It's nothing that's new. It's been around for, don't quote me on this, I believe it's 27 years in the administrative code for Department of Health, 246, 290, and it's got its own section. So this is not new, but as the PUD has evolved into best management practices, and given that this is the water system plan update, included in the water system planning process, they're asking for more robust background there. And so it just afforded the opportunity to update this particular program. It's more of operations and maintenance, but is certainly tied to Washington Administrative Code requirements. And so this was just the opportunity for best management practices, housekeeping, demonstrating to the Department of Health that you have the program in place and the components of that. So I don't believe there's any reason to go into those components. And it's my understanding as I think I've graduated to 200 level PUD understanding of policy, but certainly not beyond that college level understanding with your policy is simply the formal process of tying all of these things together. And with staff's help, I was able to help work with the resolution to tie all of this together. And we certainly relied on the historical expertise of other PUDs in putting this together. So I believe it's a good tie-in of all of these items. So in a nutshell, what cross-connection control is, you are responsible to protect your distribution system from contaminants by outside sources. And your distribution system is very tight. It's watertight. Water doesn't get out from it unless you allow it, unless there's a leak, which you repair. And water and contaminants from the outside are not allowed to get into it. And that is your responsibility as a purveyor of water. And so your cross-connection control program, the goal is where there is a known or a potential contaminant or risk to your distribution system, you are obligated to take appropriate best management practices to manage that. Many of them are guidance documents and things that we know that we need to do. And this is the process of addressing those. And the simple example is you have customers that are connected and you do not know what's going on the property or the facilities of those customers. And one of the examples you always get in class for thinking just a simple residential community in rural nature, you may have somebody that works in their shop and they work with radiators and glycol, and that's the simple example. And you certainly are not going to want that in your water system. And so if somebody is flushing a radiator with their garden hose, leaves the garden hose in the bucket that they were flushing their radiator, and you have a water main break because a backhoe operator hits your water main, you've now created a back siphon. You've drawing water into your distribution system because you're expelling water at such a great rate through a leak. What prevents that contaminant, which is a very serious one that you can grasp in your mind, from getting into your distribution system? And so your responsibility as a utility is, for best management practices, your point of delivery is the water meter. And everything beyond that is the customer's distribution system. And so it's your responsibility to either assess the degree of risk beyond the point of delivery, or to otherwise protect the distribution from a potential or known risk on the customer side of the delivery point. And that can be through a combination of surveys, inspections, various devices that are backflow devices, where it's single checks, double checks, reduced pressure backflow assemblies, all of these acronyms that we have in this industry, our personal soup in the water industry. I love that picture that Commissioner Grant painted for me now, acronym soup. So this is what all of this accumulates, is best management practices based on industry-wide knowledge that you are adopting and will be managing, and just tying it all together through your water system plan, your cross-connection control program, and of course this resolution that just pulls all the pieces together. So it's fairly intense responsibility of staff, and you have cross-connection control specialists on your staff. It's a very high-level best management practice item as a priority. And so I believe that this appropriately tied that together for staff, commissioners, and Department of Health, just to tie up this into one piece. And there's a common thread that follows through all of this, so they can grab the string and chase it to what they need to be doing in the field. So I hope that helps a little bit to a very important but complicated subject if you talk to the people that have to execute on it.
Thank you, Dave. I don't have anything else to add.
Go ahead, Commissioner Murphy.
I'm sorry, O'Toole, you can speak. I keep cutting in front of you.
No, that's fine. Go ahead.
Thank you. Dave or Steve, I understand the backflow prevention valve or cross connection valves. I'm surprised we didn't have them in already personally, because I thought this has been around for a long time, like you said, Dave. However, do our customers know that if we pass this resolution, that they are going to be required in a matter of, I think, 30 days upon notice to have a valve put in and to have it tested and turn the information into us?
Go ahead, Dave.
You want me to help you out there, Steve, a little bit?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Although we've all reviewed this, Steve and staff, I will suggest, Mike, that I can't answer what do the customers know. I am confident that throughout the detailed 61-page program, if you were to go through that, staff, my personal opinion of working with staff, they were very, very cognizant of the impact that this will eventually have on the customers. But I believe that the program they came up with, there's a few key components in the program. And imagine this, well, it's best management practices, and this is not new. It was a very, I will say, appropriate rollout of this modified best management practices. And the simple example is there's a survey process that will go on with your in-house cross-connection control specialist, and they may reach out for some outside assistance with that. And where they'll be taking the opportunity to get a handle on what the risks are. All of this is risk assessment, and that falls on your in-house staff. So imagine that you would drive through a community of single-family homes with no lawns, irrigation, no hot tubs, no swimming pools, no apparent shops. Their risk assessment may be as simple as, we have not identified any risks that would require additional protection. You may also recognize that shop example that I gave. And so your staff has outlined a time frame in the program where they are going to assess or reassess, because there are some devices already out there. Healthy Pet, for example, has one. So I believe that there are some in place, and this is just a best management practice where I'll use the phrase that you're going to be reassessing your system as a whole and looking at those, and you may identify some that already have backflow and you have evidence of that, or you may identify some new ones where you'll want to engage with the customer. And so I think that the program allows for that process to be very professional, but still best management practices. And you'll see in there that there are many months of time frame where they will step through these processes. And so I felt very comfortable having had to do these for a variety of systems when you're dealing with restaurants and many types of those environments, where staff will be able to do this in a very cordial and professional manner, and it won't be a, hit you over the head tomorrow, guess what, here's what you've got, what you have to do. So I think that's there. Do they know what's coming? I couldn't speak to that, as to what they're aware of, but the survey process is engagement with the customers. And that will be the opportunity, in my opinion, for those that don't already have these devices to become aware that you're following up on your program, and could introduce the potential need or the urgent need for these types of devices.
I think it also, Commissioner Murphy, I think it also, Dave mentioned on a couple of occasions, the potential, or I should say, looking at a couple of the mobile home parks in terms of coming on, onto our system. And this creates a good platform to have discussions with those potential new connections, and gives our staff an opportunity to look at any new connections, especially, and doing that assessment before we consider making those connections. And I think it creates an opportunity to talk to, those potential customers. I think it gets us out ahead of that very well.
Okay, I might be saying this the wrong way, because I do not question anything that Dave or Steve you're saying about putting these in. I support this. However, I do know that these backflow valves are extremely expensive depending on the line size. So if you have a fire line of 6 inches, they're going to be paying thousands of dollars to put that valve in, or a 3/4 inch one for their water line, or 1 inch probably is what they have. So my concern is does the customer realize that we're going to request them to spend possibly thousands of dollars to find someone to put them in? It's very limited right now because they don't have a lot of qualified people putting them in, certified. I don't think we have anybody on staff that's actually certified to test. Maybe you have someone picked to oversee it, but it's a lot of schooling and testing each year to be certified, and they're very hard to get in line for. So what I'm saying is, if we tell a customer within 30 days to have this installed, it took me up to a year to have them installed because I had to get in line with everybody else. Once I got on a regular testing schedule, then they were coming to me and everything was done and I was turning everything into the city of Ferndale and everybody else. But it's a very costly setup, very slow. And with today, everything it is, they may be backlogged worse than ever. So I'm just saying, please keep the customer in consideration. They might not be able to meet our demands, but eventually, hopefully they will meet them. But it is a costly procedure annually too.
Dave?
You want to follow up?
Yeah, I just give you a couple of quick reference points, Mike's, and I don't disagree with anything you said there. I am confident that today, even in today's market, as a rule of thumb, for testing on the customer's behalf, I believe that there are over 100 now qualified people to test in Whatcom County. And maybe it's just because I know the right people, I'm not sure, but as a rule of thumb, I can have a device tested within 24 hours if need be, because one got replaced for an emergency, but generally within a week or two. Now it's easy to get those tested. There's a good list of those. So I say we are confident in that respect. I would also say, depending on, I believe the PUD has enough credibility in Whatcom County with contractors and things, but I know for myself, probably a couple of months of those are being installed, and usually within 2 to 4 weeks notice. I will say in the private sector, I can't speak to how the PUD's procedures work, but within the private sector, within a couple of weeks, certainly within a month, even in this odd environment, they could be installed. And I'm going to say the typical 1 inch or 2 inch one. And then I would also make a note, maybe Steve was going to do that. These systems now being served by your fire system, as far as I'm aware, there are nobody receiving fire water from your potable system. And so the size should be relatively limited to the smaller ones. Not saying that you don't have a 2 inch meter, but and that it won't cost thousands of dollars. But I think aside from the dollar impact, I think that would be minimized. And then finally, the plan was written with trying to be conscientious of some of these challenges the customers may have. So let's just imagine a worst case scenario where your cross connection control specialist goes out, does a survey, identifies something that is very important, that you need to protect your customers, and that your customer may not even be aware that they have a risk on their side for their concern as well as yours. And staff and the PUD decides that action needs to be taken, and the customer has a financial concern. Make it as simple as, we don't have the money to do it. The plan was written and the policy is written that the PUD may, on behalf of the customer, I believe the word may was very carefully put in there, where you could take action on their behalf, on their side of the meter as their advocate, and work out the financial on the other side. So I think it's been all considerations taken into place there, that hopefully if the PUD, as they have in the past, they've addressed their responsibility and still had the opportunity to be flexible with the customer. So I think staff brought some of those things up. So, well, it will be a financial concern. I think you've positioned yourself very well with the framework to still comply with your best management practices and protecting the community, as well as leaving the door open to work with your customer in those areas. So if I would have had my commissioner hat on, I would have felt very good about being able to be responsible and not sink the customer, but still be able to move forward and protect the system. So I think that some of the other agencies that have done this before us that we were able to work off of, such as King County and Snohomish County PUD, have dealt with that. And so we've built those in for your commissioner flexibility.
Thanks, Dave. A lot has improved, thank goodness, in the last 6 years that I've been out of the workforce. So it's good to hear that. I am done.
So I had a question about the language, refers to non-potable gas or liquid, but of course there could be a non-potable solid too that could dissolve. And I'm wondering why it specifically refers to gas or liquid as a contaminant.
Fundamentally speaking, there's two types of cross-connection control. One is a back siphonage where you could have a leak in the water main and draw something back. The other is back pressure. And so when you're thinking of gas, traditionally gas has the component where it typically can create a back pressure. So they reference both of them. Doesn't mean you can't have a pump on the customer side that could create more pressure than's in your system, but gas is a concern from that perspective. So they use those specifically in the plan, recognizing back pressure versus back siphonage. So it's a broad picture, I would say, not specific to a type of gas.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 800.
Second.
There's a motion, a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 And the motion carries. So let's move on to 6C, the award of bid for Waterline crossing under Grandview Road. Thank you, Dave.
Commissioners, I'll start this one off. Back in August, the district advertised a project that involved extending both the potable and the fire lines of the Grandview system north to south under Grandview Road. Along with that project, also we're by policy now throwing spare conduits in the hole. We received bids, and I note an error in the action memo. The action memo says we received bids and open bids on September 7th. It was actually September 8th. We had done an addendum to the bid and moved one day in time. So we received only two bids. And in evaluating the bids, both were responsive in terms of the documents submitted, and also, both met the specifications for the project. However, both bids exceeded the engineer's estimate by more than 15%. So hence we were presented with a dilemma. And the dilemma for staff was this: if we were to reject both bids and re-advertise the project, it is likely that we wouldn't get lower price bids, and we wouldn't necessarily get more bid participants. Also, the other dilemma was to delay the project by rebidding it would create a problem in terms of weather, that we're moving into the rainy season, and as part of this project, we're doing a directional drill or bore underneath Grandview Road. The engineer's concern was a rising water table as we move into the rainy season, particularly in the Grandview area, as we all are aware of the drainage situation out there. So in likelihood, a rebid would push us into next year for doing that project, which then created another problem for us, in that this project, since this is a state highway, we were required to get a permit from WSDOT. It took us over a year to get the original permit. If we pushed this project in the next year and waited for the water table to come down, we ran the risk of the WSDOT permit expiring. And under that permit, we've got 20 days for construction for doing that work under Grandview Road. So it would have created a situation we might risk a permit expiration by WSDOT. So after the bids were reviewed, staff got together, we decided internally it was in the district's best interest to try to find a way to accept the lowest bid that we received, which was the Tiger construction bid. To add further context to this, the day before the bids were received and opened, our staff, Dwayne Holden, had a conversation with our engineer. It was PSC, Jeff Vander out of PSC. And Jeff said, you know, we've been looking at the market, looking at other projects and what contractors are doing, and the, you know, the price fluctuations on materials and the fact that there's disruptions in the equipment delivery dates. And, you know, if we had it to do over again, we would have came in with a higher engineer's cost estimate. So that was kind of the back of our minds, but the reality was this information, this discussion took place a day before the bids were due. So we internally decided that we could not change the engineer's estimate. At the very least, it looked perceptionally bad to change the engineer's estimate the day before the bid. Further, the contractors already knew what the engineer's estimate, regional engineer's estimate was, and they bid the way they did anyway. So that was an indication that contractors are going to cover their risk, regardless of what the engineer's estimate is. They had a concern about materials delivery and costs. So with that information in hand, we contacted John Sticken's office, discussed the situation with Rich Davis. Rich laid out basically a memo that I believe you have a copy of in your board packet, laying out the situation and sort of assessing the risks from legal counsel's viewpoint. The additional thing we did was talk to Jeff Vander out of PSC. He prepared a letter basically supporting his contention that had he had it to do over again, he would have bid the project or would have made an engineer's estimate that was higher, and he would have bumped that engineer's estimate from $153,000 up to $200,000. Had he done that prior to the bid opening, both of the contractors would have had bid amounts that were within 15% above the engineer's estimate. We would have still came to you to ask to award the bid to Tiger Construction because they were still the lowest bid. So with that, I'll open it up if you have any questions. We're as staff, we're comfortable in going with this approach because we believe the consequences of not and rebidding the project are, we don't want to go there if we don't have to. So
I just want to summarize something from Richard's memo to you, commissioners, and that is that while it's unusual for the engineer's estimate to be revised after bid and opening, is really a lot of unique circumstances under the COVID pandemic and trying to anticipate and understand marketplaces. And the circumstances here, he felt, and I would agree, don't conflict with the purposes of the statute, which are to ensure you're being fiscally responsible with the public money and awarding public contracts. He opined that the district is entitled to receive a revised engineer's estimate prior to bid opening and had no obligation to circulate that to the revised estimate. He obtained additional information, Mr. Vander did, that informed his opinion that it should be increased, this estimate. We think the spirit of the statute is fulfilled by awarding the contract to Tiger based on the revised estimate, which would have been issued by the engineer if authorized to do so, meaning issuing the revised engineer's estimate. The district was concerned about receiving that revised engineer estimate so close to bid opening. We think that the district would have been entitled to receive it had Mr. Vander had gone ahead and proceeded and issued it formally.
Any comments, questions from the commission? Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, sorry, Altu and Christine, for asking so many questions today.
That's your job, man. You're doing your job.
Well, Brian and John, we've been missing quite a few engineer estimates lately. And I do not know if it's an auditor's request that we do go out and get estimates. You mentioned something about that, John, about us being, but we're missing them by too much. And I don't mind doing what you're suggesting, what Richard said, but eventually we're gonna have to start hitting these. We are paying someone to give us this information, and we've been missing quite a few of them. And this time we're not gonna go back out and look again. We're just gonna pick the lowest bidder, even though it's over 15%. What can we do in the future to eliminate this from us revisiting this over and over again?
I think it'll continue to be a dynamic and iterative process, commissioners. It's a very difficult scenario at this time. I can tell you a story from Office Depot I learned over the weekend, but this marketplace right now in supplies and delivery is really, it's disrupting so many elements of our nation's marketplace, from logistics to supply, that no engineer, no one trying to do an estimate can anticipate all the differences. If you bear with me for a couple minutes, I was with head of marketing for used to be the Office Depot paper products for copy paper, and is now what Office Depot did was sold that division. That division could not get, they had 2 plants to produce copy paper in the country. They could not get a part to fix the plant into the Southeast. They sold the plant for packaging. And now Office Depot, Boise Cascade, now Boise Paper, has 1 plant in the country to supply office paper, copy paper. And they've decided to have 1 customer in the country, and that's Office Depot. And they've gone so far, say, we are not going to do truck delivery to customers. Like they said, Miami-Dade or LA County Schools needs copy paper. They don't do it. They only sell direct contracts to Office Depot. And the reason is they can't provide trucking. So you've just had, because Amazon is purchasing all the truck drivers. So you don't have long haul truck drivers anymore. And I use this to say, here's what happened in a matter of a few months. A plant shuts down because they can't get a part. They sell it for a different product. Now you have 1 product to supply, and they can't have long haul truckers. So that business decides to be 1 customer nationwide. If you have that in every kind of marketplace for product and supply and equipment, like in an engineering contract for a crossing of a water line, you need specialty parts. Imagine what happens to an engineer's ability to project what's happening to a marketplace, because there's so many influences, from trucking of supplies to manufacturing supplies overseas. It is an unstable, unpredictable market right now. And I think we're going to be in it for some time. And it's going to end up being an iterative process. And I think when an auditor or court looks at these scenarios, they're going to recognize we're in a once, in a century kind of scenario. I mean, if you think back, what has been so disruptive to our economy in 100 years? It was 9/11 wasn't this disruptive. World War II, World War I, we're back to the Spanish flu, and 100 years ago. So, I mean, we are really in a once in a century disruption to our nation's and world economy, from supply chain to product. So I don't think we're going to be out of this, Commissioner. We're going to be an iterative process. We're going to have to be adaptive and get the best, try to find the best way to get estimates and public bids for projects. It's just going to be difficult, and it will continue to be difficult. One other thing, we saw lumber go up 200%, or plus, put projects online. I talked to someone in a contractor supply. Their issue now is they can't get paint. And it's just, so this is just happening throughout the market. What we took for granted 2 years ago of supplies coming into our country and our communities isn't there today.
Yeah, I would just add to that, Commissioner, as well. First of all, I agree with everything John's just said. That's kind of the market we're facing right now. But in particular with this project, we've worked with PSE's engineers on several projects in the past. And I know, not that other engineers aren't thorough, but Jeff Vanderyacht is about as thorough a guy as you're gonna get in terms of evaluating projects and putting together his cost estimate. And he admits he's scratching his head right now. You know, he tries to pin down cost and then they move on him. And it's just very challenging right now. And you're in this dilemma under the statute. If you come in with too low of an estimate, you risk getting non-responsive bids because the bidders are more than 15% above. If you come in too high on the estimate, then you leave money on the table because everybody bids up to capture, you know, get just under that estimate. So it's challenging.
No, and I appreciate what you said, John and Brian, and I appreciate what everybody PSC is doing it too, but we do use the engineer's estimate to help us plan for a project. And then to find these prices be way above what we're estimating as a commissioner leaves me wondering, well, I don't know what the price is. So I guess the contractor picks what they want and I just say yes to it. And I don't like being at the mercy of a contractor just telling me what I will pay. I do appreciate the engineer's estimate, helps me focus better on what we should be expecting the cost to be. But I guess we'll just wait and see what the future holds because it looks like every project is going to be this way.
Yeah, you know, and one thing you might see is an engineer saying, you know, like contractors are doing, we're going to put a 20% variable to our estimate because we don't know what the market's going to do over the next 2 months. You just, you know, we're seeing contractors overbid because they don't take the risk of the supply chain, or they go to the customer and say, here's our bid. But if our product or materials supply varies more than 10%, you're going to pick up that increase. There's a risk allocation to this cost of supplies someone's going to bear, and they have to allocate it. And either the contractor builds it in their price so you can't get the lowest reasonable bid, or you're going to end up negotiating later, which is some kind of change order, which is going to be difficult, but we try to get the best estimate. And Jeff told us he needed to revise it because of the market conditions.
So with regard to this, I'm sure Brian and staff are thinking about process improvements. And I would assume one of those would be that you're considering is having the engineer's estimate being closer in proximity of time to when the actual bids go out. So because we're in a rapidly changing market, that would give the engineer a little bit more representative information because it'd be closer to the time of bid. It's important to work with the engineer and the engineers we use. We don't want them falling on their sword because I know I'm an engineer and we don't want to be too hard because it is a dynamic situation, but also maybe suggestions might come from the engineers we're working with to how to make their estimates more robust too. So.
Yeah, Commissioner, I can respond in two ways to that. One is that we have talked to other organizations. I had a recent conversation with one, and one of the things they're doing on their project cost estimates, they're just bumping up the contingency percent in their cost estimate. The other thing that this current situation brought out, it was an education process, I think, for staff, in the sense that we truly believe that under the statutes, you know, there's usually a period of time, and in this particular project, it was a 96-hour window in which, before the bid is submitted, you have no more communication with the contractor, no more opportunity to make addendums to the bid documents. You know, basically, you're in a static situation waiting for the bid. We felt we could not adjust an engineering estimate just prior to the bid opening. And now we've learned from legal counsel that's, you know, basically we could have. So we'll take that into consideration in the future as well.
And I think
Second,
I think-
sorry,
Commissioner, I think also it's almost project by project, as we've experienced, on some of the switchgear and, work at substation, just getting the product. I mean, you may get a bid that's acceptable and then, before the contract is signed, the bidder, indicates that they're simply not able to get the product. Because of conditions like the wildfires in California and, the demand in the market on certain types of equipment. So I think it's almost project by project is what we're seeing and being able to respond to, certain, the current market conditions and the impact on whether it's supply chain or whether it's product availability or whatever it is. So.
I have a second question, and it relates to a different issue in this item. And that has to do with the fiscal note regarding fiscal impact. So the statement is that this project will have no negative fiscal impact, but in the first part, it says it is not identified as a separate CIP in the budget. So it is an incremental item, right? And I would just like to suggest that we consider the when I review the packets, quite often we list something as having a fiscal impact that's a no impact. And I'm not exactly sure that we provide as much information in that section as we could to explain, what how it actually ends up getting binned in the budget, for example.
I'll respond to that, Commissioner, and this one is unique because looking back, if you noticed in the the background section of the action item request, this, when we went through the LUD process, I believe it was in 2000, and prior to that, let's see. Yeah, no, 2000. And the district determined, based upon the request for extension of both the potable and the fire system in Grandview, I-5, Northgate, we created this, assessment district, LUD, and we determined at that time, before we proceeded, which properties should be assessed for improvements in that system. And this property was actually included in the assessment. In other words, we laid an assessment on this property owner for the payment of a portion of those improvements, but we did not make the improvements that would allow for the connection of this property to the system. That was an error on our part, clearly. And so now when we get to this point and the customer wants that connection, we determined that we feel that it would be appropriate for the district through, the Grandview system and to find the resources to pay for this improvement, because in this case, this customer has already paid for it. So it would be inappropriate for us to go to that customer. So what we're proposing is that that the district picks up the cost of this, and it comes through a couple of different sources. One, mostly through the Alcoa Reserve Fund, that we still got sufficient funds to cover it, and I think yet to be determined, we may look at a smaller portion of it to be picked up under the capital improvements section of the Grandview system. So there is a fiscal impact, but it's not an impact that will change any of the 2021 capital or operating budget. So.
Right, and I just, that's what I'm really, thanks for what you said there, really captures what I was saying, which is a need to say that there is a fiscal impact, but it's one that's budgeted.
Yeah.
And so there, perhaps when we put the fiscal notes on these items, that we delineate when it's completely identified and budgeted, when this action also is having a budgeting implication, as is in this case, we differentiate those two, is what I'm trying to say. And of
I
course, the
agree.
third case where there is a unexpected, unforeseen circumstance, which wasn't budgeted, and we're essentially the commission is approving kind of almost an amendment to the budget by voting in support of it.
I appreciate that, Commissioner. Yes, we will definitely make sure in the future that we clarify that in any of these action items. So
Thank you, Steve. Is there any further discussion on item 6C?
No, not for me.
I'll make a motion to award a bid to Tiger Construction for the Grandview Road water crossing.
And I'll second that motion.
There's been a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Then all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 The motion carries. So let's move on to item number 6D, which is the professional services agreement on the regional water supply plan in the second
Rebecca.
phase.
I believe Rebecca will handle this.
Yes, Commissioners, hi, I put on my other hat now. Since I manage this grant. Just as a little background, in 2019, the district was awarded $100,000 on behalf of the Watershed Management Board to start the regional water supply plan. And we came to you back in 2020 to start phase 1. We initially got $100,000 in January 2020, and then we're awarded another $100,000. So the total grant is $200,000. That funding comes from the funneled from the Environmental Protection Agency through the Strategic Initiative Leads for the Puget Sound Partnership. And we completed phase 1 of the project using Aspect Consultant, and you may or may not remember, we came back to you in 2020 and you approved them and approved their task order. Now we're coming back to start phase 2 and the Regional Water Supply Working Group, which consists of the PUD, staff from the PUD, Whatcom County, the 2 tribes, and WDFW, all agreed that we would choose RH2. The focus on this second phase is more on the water supply portion of it. And RH2 has a lot of experience working in the Nooksack Basin on water supply issues. So it took us a while to work through getting the task, the work order, everybody agreeing to what we wanted the work order to look like. And so now we're coming to you to get approval, first of all, for a professional service agreement with RH2 Engineering for this specific task to manage this phase 2 report, which we will be working on through the rest of this year and into 2022. So this would be the first approval here today would be to approve the professional service agreement with RH2. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer that.
Any comments, questions from the commissioners? I have a question. Rebecca,
Sure.
one of the questions that I've gotten from one of our community stakeholders on our regional water supply planning effort is the treatment and the depth of technical work as it relates to water use efficiency. And I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. And my question is, what is your thinking about that and how that may be addressed in this next phase of the work?
So there is, and I can certainly provide the link to the report for the phase one, which it did address some of that water use efficiency. And it will be addressed in phase two. However, there are several plans that are already being, not necessarily through the regional water supply plan, but that we refer to that are already being done. So it's not necessary that the regional water supply plan is going to reinvent more water use efficiency programs. They're going to take what's already been offered out there and make sure that people have reference to that in the plan. So there will be more discussion on the water use efficiency in the phase two. But again, we're not going to reinvent the wheel. There are already plans being, the county is doing some work, I think, with the conservation district right now. So those are the things that will be referred to in the regional water supply plan, existing plans that are pretty standard things. And I, for instance, let me just.
And would you argue, Rebecca, that this is not the right place for that more fundamental water use efficiency work to occur?
I don't think I would not be speaking for the whole group, so I can't respond to that. I think also that people should be, for instance, all the small cities, city of Bellingham, have to provide to the through the Department of Health reporting process, water use efficiency programs. And they do have some pretty, like I know the city of Bellingham has some very good ones. So I don't think the regional water supply plan would come up with, you know, a overall how to make that happen with every particular sector, but we're going to try. You know, I mean, like you take ag, I mean, they have water use efficiency programs that they're working on themselves with, you know, irrigation and things like that. So those, yes, those will be addressed in the regional water supply plan. But we're going to base our, and this is, I'm speaking for myself. I'm not speaking for the entire regional water supply group. I'm speaking that we are going to pull that information into the plan so people are aware that those things are happening. Yes. In different sectors.
Hey, Rebecca,
Steve, could you take a shot at my politically charged question?
well, I'm not going to address it directly because I know, you know, I know I've had and you've had several discussions with Eric Hurst about this issue. And I know Eric has, you know, indicated several times to myself and I think to the county that water use efficiency is not being considered effectively or efficiently in the, you know, in the water supply plan. But I would say that I agree with what Rebecca, I believe, was trying to indicate, was that there are other opportunities and efforts now being conducted by the Conservation District, by the Whatcom County, specifically to look at areas of water use efficiency in cities, as well as I believe it's the conservation districts that working on, you know, water use efficiency directly with agriculture, and
Yes.
they're working with the, you know, the WIDs on that effort. And I know Henry Berlink and the Ag Water Board have been, you know, involved in that. So I agree with what Rebecca indicated, that the water system or the water supply plan is not going to take up the specifics around how do we develop water use efficiency with agriculture or with some of the smaller cities or water district, but we certainly will reflect the outcome of that other work that's going on. So as an opportunity in looking at specifically at water supply as a quantity in the county. So
Thank you, Steve. And would it be fair to say that then the work that we'll dig in a little bit deeper is occurring? It's just won't be occurring in the context of this. phase 2 of the regional water supply plan, except it'll be referred to and contextualized.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. I think that, you know, at the end of this phase 2 work, we should be able to look at that water supply plan that reflects those kinds of water use efficiency programs that are now being developed by, you know, other partners in the basin.
Right. Correct.
So I'd like to bring up something that relates to this, but may fall outside this agenda item. So if that's what you feel, then we can address it separately and follow. But I think that I'd like to understand going forward how we can support communication about this phase 1 and phase 2 effort. I'd like to know from Steve, your and staff's feelings, of course, Rebecca, but not putting Rebecca on the spot, even though she's listening to me say this. You guys think about who you want to read this plan, who you really think that for us to improve how we coordinate together, how we work as a team in the county, who really needs to get at least a briefing on this plan as it's developing. And when I think it might be beneficial to have one soon, and then one later upon culmination of phase 2. Just because people need to see things more than once. And there's some opportunity for feedback if that happens too, for better stakeholder input. And you know, there's in watershed management board meetings and other meetings on water related policies, regular comments made about the importance for us all to be coordinated and communicate. And this is a good one of a couple of important documents that we have in our community to foster that, so that we're all understanding all the same terms, and we're understanding who's mostly who's doing what. So I guess I wanted to bring that up. It's not something that probably fits completely under this agenda item, so I apologize for that. But it is a thought that's occurred to me as a result of this discussion.
And I can speak to that just briefly. First, we have a relatively large mailing list that we send out these documents for review and comment. It's not just within the Regional Water Supply Plan Working Group, but it goes out to the public. I know we sent it out to the planning unit for review, and there's other people. I'm not the one who manages that particular email blast, but Becky Peterson, excuse me, my phone's ringing. Hold on.
Probably Becky
Sorry
calling.
about that. Yeah, she's probably calling me. But Becky Peterson is contracted under this grant to be the coordinator, and so she manages all of that. But it's a fairly large list of people who receive an requests for comments on the products that we've created. And those 2 reports for phase 1 are actually on the WIRA 1 Watershed Management Board website, which is managed by the Whatcom County, and we make people aware of that. So we are doing that outreach to, I mean, certainly not everybody in Whatcom County, but the people who are interested know how to find where the information is. And there are quite a few. I mean, we've got a lot of people from ag paying attention. Henry Beerlink is on the working group, and we have had a lot of comments from the environmental caucus on this report, on these reports. So we're paying it. And their comments are being addressed in the report. So this is a clarification there.
And I would imagine that if anybody in the county who is passionate about or is actually responsible for water related policy discussions, this is a good starting point for their education. And somebody new moves to the county and wants to participate in countywide water related planning. This would be an important document to review.
Great. correct?
I would add, thank you, Rebecca, for that. And, but I would also add that, I mean, just as recent as yesterday, Becky and Rebecca and I had a lengthy discussion about this issue of, coordination and collaboration, and on different projects that are going on, the water supply plan, drainage-based management, all the areas of focus under the Watershed Management Board 5-year work plan, and continued concern that, and this is, when I say this, it's not a criticism or a concern about any one individual, whether it's Becky Peterson or folks at the county, but there's still an ongoing concern on some of our parts that all this work is not really being collaborated. There's no good, strong integration and collaboration on the various projects and the silos of work. And we continue to send that message to the county, especially. And I mean, your question, Commissioner Desmani, about, just information and getting that information out and access to it. And, I think this is an ongoing thing that we're trying to address in, the other grant that Rebecca is managing, and that is the outreach and education piece. How important it is to continue to build that framework around, so people know this is where the work's being done, who's doing what, and how they can get involved. And I think that there's progress being made over the last year or so on that, but we've got a long way to go.
Mm-hmm. And just as a reminder that, so the WIRA 1 Management Board, which consists of, again, Whatcom County, the PUD, the 2 tribes, the city of Bellingham, WDFW, and the AG is considered an ex officio member. Did I miss anybody, Steve? I don't think I
The
did.
small cities now are on.
Excuse me. Yes, small cities. Yes, critical. The lead agency or lead entity for that WIRA 1 Management Board is Whatcom County. And like I said, the PUD has done several grants on behalf of the WIRA 1 Management Board, but we're trying to work at better coordinating with the lead agency on how to make sure we are coordinated. And briefly with the outreach grant, the next big thing that we're going to be working on this fall is developing a survey that will go out to many people about how we can, what are the things they want the WIRA 1 Management Board to provide in outreach materials. And that's going to go out to a lot of people. So stay tuned. You'll probably get a survey to fill out.
Yeah, and I can put the plug again. Maybe we can write a grant for the county to hire a natural resources person.
Okay.
We can apply to EDI. to get the county to hire. Sorry. Okay, so moving on. Are there any further questions on the? Oh, it's important to say, Steve, Rebecca, right? We're changing vendors here, right? The
Correct.
phase 1
Yes.
vendor with Aspect Consulting,
Yep.
and phase 2 RH2.
Mhm.
That's expected to be seamless, that transition.
Yes.
Okay.
RH2 has already been reviewing all of the work that Aspect has been done prior to this. We've been working with them in the last couple of months, and they've got everything in their hands that they need to have. So it's kind of been on our side of getting everybody on the working group, going over the task order and making sure everybody's happy about what those tasks are that RH2 develops. So it's been pretty thoroughly vetted between RH2 and the working group. And we're going to have our first meeting sometime in the next couple of weeks between RH2 and working group to do a little bit more detailed work. We're not changing the scope, but they just want to clarify some things with them. So.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on item 6E?
Well, I'm just wondering, there's a work order and a professional services agreement. So how do you want us to do this here?
I would recommend that you take action on the professional services agreement first and then consider the actual task order.
Okay, so then we entertain a motion to approve the professional services agreement with RH2.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the professional services agreement with RH2 Engineering.
I'll second that.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 The motion carries. And now
And that-
next on to the work order.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve work order number 17 with RH2 Engineering.
I'll second that.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Commissioner Murphy?
Yes, can anyone tell me why we are picking the ones we are out of the 16 that are left? 2 of them have already been done. Because I look at Birch Bay, Bellingham Bay, Birch Bay, and Lake Whatcom, I thought those were very critical ones. And yet they're being delayed. Is there a reason for that, Rebecca or Steve? or who?
Yes, I can answer that. That was that's one of the reasons why it took us a little bit longer to get this task order finalized and to the commission. That was a very big discussion with the Regional Water Supply Working Group. And we to expand, so we had 3 pilot projects in phase 1. That was Bertrand, Drayton Harbor, and South Fork, Nooksack South Fork. And then that phase 2 is supposed to expand to the broader LIRA 1. And we looked at what we call the surface water delineation boundary map. Mike, it's right there in that room where you're sitting. That is all of those. Yeah, that's all of them that we could have done. And just as an FYI, we did have RH2 give us the cost of how much it would cost to do at least all of those that haven't been looked at, because we weren't going to include South Fork or Drayton Harbor or Bertrand again, because we already did those. So that would have been, I think, $127,000 to do all of those. And so the Regional Water Supply Working Group prioritized, and we got costs for the first top 6, and that's what we chose. And then that value was I think it was about $90,000 to do that work. And then if we had added then they prioritized after that. I think they prioritized Lummi Bay, Silver Creek, and Sumas River. So if we had done 9 of those, it would have cost it would have gone up to closer to 100,000. So because of the budget that we have right now, we have that list of priorities. And I think what the Regional Water Supply Working Group would like to do is at least get those 6 done and see if we can come up with funding to do more detail work in the future on that. So for phase 2, is the best we can do right now is those 6 that we picked. And that was an agreement between all of the Regional Water Supply Working Group, the tribes, the county, us, the city. Everybody agreed that those were the top priority right now.
Thank you, Rebecca. Appreciate the information.
It's interesting, Commissioner Murphy, it's interesting that when the PUD and through the Watershed Management Board initially requested funding for this work, our budget that we put forward was $250,000. And looking back now, if we were able to get the $250,000, we would have been able to complete this work for the entire basin based upon the budget that RH2 brought to the table now. So this does, taking this action today does not eliminate the opportunity for us to continue to try to find additional funds and, expand the work to the entire basin. But it does move us forward with a consensus by the folks on the watershed or on the water supply plan working group that this is the best use of those funds right today. So.
And I am working with a WDFW is the grant manager on for the funds that we receive. And I've been working with them trying to get an additional budget. Whether or not we can, we're probably going to try to have a phone conversation with them in the next couple of weeks to help continue this. And I think probably in hindsight, when we sat down and looked at what we were trying to do with this regional water supply plan, I think we could have easily gone beyond the $250,000 because there is just so much information that we want to try to consolidate and understand and new stuff that we'd like to collect. But it takes a lot of capacity and funds to make that happen. So we're kind of lean and mean right now, but maybe future wise, we can keep adding on more detail to that regional water. I don't see this as a static. Once we get it done, we're done. I think the regional water supply plan is going to be one of those hopefully continued working documents that we're updating and amending.
This is even more dynamic than broadband.
Hey, it's all about water, you guys. I don't know about that broadband stuff. No.
Regarding the additional funds, I think speaking for myself, I would support asking the county and perhaps even, other local governments to fork up a few grand for us to finish and have a comprehensive document at the end of this process, including PUD. And so if we can't get it from DFW or Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife's help, without their help, I think it'd be good to get a complete report.
And we've already had we've already had some discussions to start that discussion with the county executive and whether or not either through EDI or to use some of the $250,000 that the county was allocated to this last legislative session, to support the work that the county executive is proposing to be done locally. This might be an opportunity to use a portion of those dollars to quote enhance this work. So, because some of the same information, that would be gathered through the water supply plan process going countywide would certainly enhance discussions that the county executive is trying to lead on in terms of settlement. So.
Say, Steve?
Yes.
So if development goes on at Cherry Point, could those funds be raised there to work on some of these other areas? Money set aside from the sale of land or something to do studies around the area there, around the bays and stuff?
Could, it depends. I mean, that now you're talking about, if you're talking about, using a portion of new property tax that would be developed off of development, at Cherry Point, that would be an opportunity for the county and the port to share with the PUD and, the water supply planning process some of those new, real estate taxes. That's an opportunity that has not been gone on unnoticed. We've already had some discussion with the county executive and with the port, not specifically around, these water supply issues, but utilizing and sharing new real estate taxes out at Cherry Point to conduct, water and energy planning. So.
Thank you. Thank you, O'Toole, for allowing me to ask questions.
So thank you, Michael. Are there any further comments or questions on item 6E? work order number 17 with RH2? No, okay, so let's entertain a motion to approve the work order number 17.
You did already provide a
Yeah.
motion.
So just put
Chris,
aye.
I think we're already done. Okay, sorry.
so you just, yeah. Just need to say yes.
Okay, so all those in favor of work order number 17 with RH2, please signify by saying aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Or
Thank you.
yes,
Thank you.
the motion carries, yeah.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Rebecca.
Thank you.
I'd like to check in with the commission on where we're at in our agenda. We have two significant time items. One is the budget, 2022 budget, which I assume will be a presentation, a pretty lengthy discussion. And then secondly, the items around California Creek and particularly the executive session, which we'll talk about. One,
In the executive session, we have special counsel joining us at 11.
at 11. So it's 10:11 right now. I'm wondering, would it be acceptable to everyone to have a 10-minute break? And so that then we can dive right into the budget and the other items on the other big item on the agenda.
Just, go ahead, Commissioner Murphy. I'm sorry.
Oh, I apologize, Steve. Altu, do you want to do 6F before we take a break or what?
Oh, I'm sorry. I misspoke. Yeah, I think it makes sense to finish item 6F first before we and then take a break before the budget and the executive session in California conversation.
I think a break is fine. I'm okay with a 5-minute break so we can just keep moving, but
Okay, yeah, sure. All right, well, let's
Okay.
let's move on to item 6F and then we'll take a short break after that, either 5 or 10 minutes. Let's see where we end up at when 6F is done and then we'll go from there. Go ahead, Brian.
Commissioners, before we get into this action item, it's occurred to me that given all our recent discussions on disruptions to the market that's come up in the various meetings, I'm considering requesting a change in my job title to Director of Special Market Conditions. So I'll discuss that with Steve.
You got it.
And here we have another one. There have been
Brian, you've always been special. It's finally in your job title.
Oh, no, it's that and all other. It's already covered.
Commissioners, there have been several occasions, both recently and in the past, where the district had an opportunity to purchase used equipment to fulfill whatever our needs were at that time. And because of the competitive bid process and our current purchasing policy, that was impossible. We could not really participate in a public option to buy used equipment. If we participate, then it would have to go back to the board to seek approval to purchase that equipment. The auction's over. So, giving the timing of some of these purchases, which would be to the, district's benefit because it would be cheaper to buy the used equipment than new. We've lost those opportunities. So what's before you today is approval of resolution number 796, which would, in specified circumstances, set aside the competitive bid process and give the general manager authority to approve used equipment purchases or materials purchases up to a dollar amount of $200,000, with the proviso that he keeps the commission informed of those purchasing decisions. And I can give you a couple of examples. We've had in our budget for several years, actually, the purchase of a bucket truck for the electric division. And we keep putting it off because the purchase of a new bucket truck can be several $100,000, and which is a significant budget item. Versus if we could have participated in a secondary market and gone to public auction, there are opportunities to buy used bucket trucks at a much reduced price. So that's just one example. We've also looked at forklifts, the same type of thing. We don't really need a new piece of equipment for that purpose, but we found it difficult to participate in that market. So what we're asking today is for approval of resolution number 796, which is attached to this action memo. And with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have.
No, I don't. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Okay, I'm sorry about this, Brian, Steve. I'm not in favor of such a resolution, especially when it says that the $200,000, or as long as the budget can hold the cost, be used to purchase used equipment material. I'm not aware of any public auctions going on right now. Everything's online, which gives you at least 30+ days to make a purchase. And so I don't see the emergency, especially with us meeting twice a month, that we could be there quickly to get it. I could make a recommendation that, you know, and where the general manager through a resolution can call each commissioner and say, we have a chance of purchasing something for this amount. Are you for, nay, or you know, for it, yay or nay? And then that way you could do a phone. But to just say this resolution gives $200,000 to be spent as long as the district budget can handle it, that's quite a lot of money there. What are the other commissioners feeling? I'm open to saying, let's put a used equipment budget, which maybe is limited to 200,000. I'm open for that, but not just to say where the district's budget is set.
John, would you just want to comment about Commissioner Murphy's idea of doing a phone?
That would be a meeting that would violate the Open Meetings Act.
Well, John, you know, we do that all the time in the fire district when we need to buy stuff. And I'll tell you, your organization approves it. So is there a difference between a government?
I have to look at that, Commissioner. I have, you know, a phone solicitation of order of a commissioners to purchase something in this fashion would, I think, would violate the Open Public Meetings Act. You're allowed to waive competitive bidding requirements for special market conditions. And I think that's what's being proposed here. It's mirroring the state procurement processes that the director can make those calls. You're delegating that authority to your general manager in the instance of a special market condition. And they're having a reporting requirement. I don't know the circumstances of fire districts doing a polling to make a purchase. I would presume there's already been a delegation. It's a courtesy individual poll, not seeking an authorization. I suspect the commission's already granted that to the chief in some fashion.
The commissioners are granted in that fashion is that if you find something you want to buy at an auction, that a phone call can be arranged with each commissioner for the response, telling them how much it is. They get approval, and then the next meeting we vote on it in a public meeting. But by that
I'll have to see the policy, talk to our fire district
My
staff. My reaction is that's the problem.
My concern, you asked Commissioner Murphy for input for the commissioners, and my concern is that this feels like something new, a new precedent. And so I just want to make sure we've thought it through and digested it, because it's a new way of doing business, and it'd be worth looking at what other organizations both within the county and across PUDs are doing with regards to similar things. So unless this is super urgent, I'd like to suggest that we do a little bit more background, have a more comprehensive action memo that would answer some of those questions. I don't know if there's anything urgent as it relates to this particular item in the next 2 weeks.
No, there's no such urgency. I think that it would be good to have some clarification. I heard Brian speak to this, and Commissioner Murphy brought it up also, in terms of an auction. This isn't just in an opportunity to take advantage of an auction. There are always opportunities to literally drive around the county and see, used equipment that might, based upon, our staff's review of, the equipment, what the status is of it, is it in good operating condition, all that kind of thing, that we would certainly consider purchasing, that used piece of equipment, versus, even if it's identified, in our budget, with and sidestep, or take advantage of those, the equipment being on a used lot, rather than having an engineer, go through and set up specifications, go through the public bidding process, and so it's not just, there's an auction coming up, there's a piece of equipment sitting on the auction lot, we want to take advantage of it, kind of a thing. So two responses: no, this is not an emergency timing. We have to, we'd like to have you take action on it today because, we're going to miss an opportunity. But also, it's more than just looking at, an auction, if you would. And I think that if, some clarification on whether the $200,000 is an appropriate amount, or that, there's other criteria around how we proceed, or how, staff proceeds in purchasing under this new policy, is something that we can clarify and tighten up if that's, if that's a concern. So I just lay that out there.
If I may,
Yeah. Go ahead.
tomorrow is the PUD attorney summer conference. And I'm chairing a roundtable at the end of that. I have 2 topics I'm going to be addressing. I'll add this to the third to see if the other PUD attorneys have approached this. The other thing I would note is that, given the subsection B, is that the purchase of used materials are initiated only where budgeted funds within a particular amount are authorized for. The commission would have already authorized the purchase of the particular product as part of the budget. So you're now delegating the authority to make the direct buy to the director, if he or the manager, if he sees an opportunity to buy that used equipment, either at an auction or side of the road. So because you've already authorized that purchase within your budget. It's not something he can just have a slush fund of 200,000 to go purchase something on a need or a whim.
I was gonna just bring up I don't have any, I would be happy to approve this resolution today because of that language, which is under 1B, under the whereases. So we've already approved these purchases in the budget. And I support getting used equipment where possible. I think it's good to support the secondary market. And but if we want to wait to approve it, we can table it too. But I just wanted to say that I felt like that gives us a lot of protection. And obviously we it's under the the general manager would be the one that executes the purchase. So
I'd like to propose that we do table it to be reintroduced under old business at our September 28th meeting. I'd like to make that as a motion.
okay, I'll second that motion. I'm fine with tabling it.
Is there any further discussion?
I would like to encourage Steve to call me or Brian so we can talk about this. I do have other concerns about used equipment.
And
It's a
you've got
good,
experience with that, Commissioner Murphy.
excuse me,
You got extensive experience with that, Commissioner.
I've made very poor decisions which cost me dearly. I
Well,
would like,
that's kind of your experience. That's a bad.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm fine with tabling it.
Great. Then all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Great. So we'll discuss this at our September 28th meeting under old business. So it's 10:26. Can we come back at 10:30 then? And continue, or would you like a few more minutes?
Let's do 10:31.
Okay, 10:31 it is.
Okay.
Okay, now where is everybody? That was record time for me. I fed a lot of animals in 5 minutes, let me tell you.
All I did was eat some cereal.
So should
I
I
have
tell you?
this, I have these 2 turkeys that I've got, first time I've had turkeys. And turkeys are very personable. And when they were babies, I couldn't imagine the idea of preparing them for Thanksgiving. I just couldn't imagine the idea. But now they're a lot bigger and they're just as clingy. They were like outside my door right here. Now somehow the idea of Canadian Thanksgiving is seeming more and more attractive.
Hey, I started smoking my turkeys a couple years ago on the Traeger. Best turkeys we've ever had. Not that I'm any great chef, but they cook it so well and so smoothly.
Smoked turkey, huh?
And smoke it on a Traeger grill. It was just
Okay,
evenly
maybe
cooked.
Maybe I can borrow yours in the
Yeah,
celebration.
there you go.
Thanksgiving.
There you go.
Not that I don't like our Thanksgiving, it's just that, it's a month earlier, so there's some advantages to that.
Hey, Steve, check your email real quick.
One less month of being followed around everywhere I go.
Yeah, there you go.
Great, should we get started? So then, is the recording started, Rebecca?
It looks like it's recording.
Great.
Everyone will know about your turkeys now.
Great.
Yeah.
Yes, I was told to leave it on. I was going to turn it off till you guys came back, but I was told to leave it on. So
Great.
it's been on.
So I think the next item on our agenda is item number 6G, which is a work session on the budget.
Commissioners, I'll just start this off. Every year, as we start developing our proposed next year's operating capital budget, we go through a series of work sessions with you. And based upon the budget schedule that you, preparation schedule that you approved earlier in the year, we are expecting to bring to you a draft 2022 budget at your second meeting in October. But before then, we have done this in the past, we just want to take an opportunity for each of you to provide input into just, I'll say it at the 40,000-foot level, areas that you want to indicate to us that, that you want to make sure that we have considered in development of that draft budget. So today, I just, I sent out a very brief memo to you indicating the general areas that we are considering to this point. And basically it's, core operations and capital budget that would support our core operations, both water and energy. And then also that we are reflecting in the work that we've done so far, the specific initiatives and ongoing strategies that you approved in the update to our strategic plan and working with Jim Darling in preparation for the general manager's recruitment process. So with that, I don't really have anything to add. I just wanted to make sure that you all had an opportunity to have this discussion and basically tell me, areas that of concern that you want to make sure that we address as we bring that draft budget to you.
Great. Commissioners.
Well, Steve, you and I talked a little bit about this when we were discussing applying for the CURB funding. With, so much broadband funding out there, I think our top priority, of course, should be to be applying for those funds. But I think also making sure we have enough funding to continue to do our work on broadband, like how we're paying NOAANET to apply for the CURB funding. So just wanting to make sure that we, and I think things like technical assistance around looking at things like tax increment financing. So sometimes to get money, you need money. So just want to make sure that we think about that in our budget, and you and I kind of already talked about that. So that was something on broadband. I have two other things. Should I just say them right now? Okay. So, and this is not just capital projects that you want us to talk about, right, Steve?
Oh, no,
Okay.
It's everything.
Okay. So I think, another thing, Steve, that you and I have been talking about offline was things related to internships or scholarships around building utility industry expertise. I'd forward Steve example of something they're doing at Emerald PUD in their community, trying to encourage high schoolers and college students in the Emerald PUD service territory to go into the utility industry. And I would love to see something where we put our own spin on it, whether we're working with BTC or Western, but I know, again, managing interns takes time and energy, but if that's a pipeline for building expertise within our own PUD or within the PUD or utility industry, I think that's a really valuable thing to be thinking about. And it's related to our strategic initiative. I don't have our strategic initiatives right in front of me, but I think we called it kind of like being a resource on utility issues in the community. And I think that working with young people on those apprenticeship, scholarships, internship programs, kind of spending some time thinking about that would be great. And then, I also feel like we don't know what the future is going to look like, but we do know that we are going through a big transition in the next year with a new general manager, hopefully coming out of this pandemic, going from all remote commission meetings to hopefully in-person commission meetings. And I think just recognizing that that has put stress on our organization and potentially building in some budget for training and team building and just some ways to make sure that we weather this big transition that we're all going through in this organization well, with potentially working with a consultant that can really help with the transition. We also did our strategic initiatives, but we didn't do a full update to the strategic plan. And we'd always talked about having the new general manager kind of put their own imprint on that too. And so all of that might kind of roll up into one thing, but I think that we just should really make sure that we are budgeting for someone to come in that can help with some of that organizational development, potentially as it relates to strategic planning. And then my last thing, because I just jotted down all my stuff yesterday when I was thinking about this, is just how I feel really excited about the any electric vehicle charging opportunities that we can be a part of. I know we talked about that with the Plant One rebuild, and just kind of I mean, of course, I'm assuming the budget's going to align with what's in our strategic initiative. So I'm not like talking about renewable energy because that's already in our strategic initiatives. But I think that something that's maybe not explicitly laid out in the strategic initiatives is that I just love to use our role as a public entity to help continue to build public charging infrastructure. I just think it's going to be so important over the next few years. So those are kind of the things that maybe weren't specifically highlighted in the strategic initiatives that I wanted to highlight myself, and that's all I had to share.
Thank you, Commissioner Grant. So for me, the thing that, looking at the last year or so, we've identified a lot of opportunities for growth of the PUD scope and focus. And what we're discovering is that it's been hard to fill positions. And one of the ways we've solved that problem is by, well, I wouldn't say solved. One way we've addressed the problem is to hire contractors, as in the case of NOAANET, to provide some capability like a staff person would provide, but also recognizing that's it's a practical reality. And I see maybe that being, at least in the near term, an interim solution for addressing the energy support analyst, as well as potentially the need for the project manager too. And I want to figure out if there's a budget construct to deal with the fact that we want to have the flexibility in our budgeting to resolve issues that can't be resolved in the near term as far as placement with purchase services. And I want to make the question, how we can look at the budget so that it's not seen as two totally different bins, you know what I'm saying? So that we recognize that we're serving the similar function, even though it's not through an actual hire. So I guess that's a question for Annette to think about and work on, because that's maybe increasingly something we do. That's my primary input into the budget process.
Commissioner Murphy.
What would you believe? I stay up nights worrying about these things.
Yeah.
I like everything that Christine said and O'Toole said. I support that. I don't know what to actually add to it this year because, drought has become a big issue to me. Water's always been a big issue, the quality and quantity of water. I look at Trigg Road here and I look at the acreage, and maybe this is a good place to put a holding area for the Nooksack, but it's money. With hiring of new staff and staff getting prepared to retire in the next couple of years is all going to be a bigger expense to us. So I'm really, Steve, confused on what kind of suggestions to make, because everything I want, solar panels, solar farm, wind, everything, even I think of Cherry Point would be a great place overlooking the San Juan there on those cliffs to put wind, because it's pretty reliable through there. But everything's got a big price tag to it. So I'm coming back down to thinking what we're doing already when it comes to what we're obligated. It's water especially, supported by our customers and supported by the new things we're taking on as broadband and things. I think I pretty well exhausted your budget or our budget just by keeping up where we're at. We're losing some grants, and I don't know how the grants are going to affect us in the future. Do we have to dig a little deeper into our budget to offset those grants we're losing to keep up with the work we're doing? So I don't know. I'm throwing a lot of back on your shoulders, but it's what I think about. So thanks.
Well, I can say, I'll just make just a couple of comments. First of all, thank you all for your suggestions, ideas, comments. It's an interesting time for myself and staff as we proceed in the next couple of months in developing a budget that will provide an opportunity to address, all the things that you've identified in the strategic plan and the initiatives and ongoing and things that you just brought up today, and balance that, balance a budget that reflects all of that potential work. At the same time, recognizing that we've got significant cost increases associated with water rights management, especially around adjudication, and then trying to balance what the most appropriate source of revenue is for all of this work, whether it's ongoing or whether it's, expansion of discussion around broadband and renewable energy and, all those opportunities, and trying to identify the appropriate source. Should that be our water customers? Should that be our energy customers? Should that be, combination of both? Should we rely on only grants for, a portion of, this project or that project? And at the same time, as you indicated in your discussion on the strategic plan, that you want to, and we will certainly attempt to do that, is to provide some sense of what work could be done next year under the direction, of the new general manager, giving that, the new general manager the funding and potentially the flexibility to move some of these initiatives forward, working with you. At the same time, we're going to be asking you to approve a budget probably before that new general manager steps in, on task. So it's a challenging time, but we certainly will address anything that you've already brought up in the strategic plan. But today, these comments are very, very helpful. So,
Steve,
yes.
Would there be a way, like some of the suggestions were made is mainly us partnering up with others, education and other things, which it doesn't really have a big cost to it, but it can be really beneficial to us in the community. Really think that's great. But when you and your staff look at the budget, could you come back to us and tell us what the cost price tag is to some of these things? I mean, you may say, yeah, I'll throw a couple $1,000 in this, but you're not going to get much. If we can't be successful, maybe we should reevaluate what our strategic plan is and start putting numbers to them. I don't know. The other commissioners can answer that too.
Well, I think that in response to that, Commissioner, of course, none of us can identify an absolute, absolute confidence in success and especially on any new program or expansion of what we've done, what we've been doing in the last year or so. But I think that we can identify, and we will try to do that in development of the budget, as to here's what I think, staff thinks that you are asking us to do, and here are the cost ramifications of taking that next step, if you would, whether it's, internships, whether it's communication to the public, whether it's that developing that will be the resource of utilities, information throughout the county. We will try to develop for you what our picture of what that means in terms of cost. Now, a lot of that work is going to be, first time for us to move forward with. So just like some of the work that Rebecca's been doing and we've been doing on the outreach and, education and outreach grant. I mean, it's like, how defined will our role be in doing that? And at the same time, how can we best partner up with other agencies in the county or with the state, in conducting that work? So I know that's sort of a mushy answer, but when we get to the actual budget and start laying out, pieces, whether it's adjudication, whether it's outreach, whether it's, communicate, whatever, we'll try to have a clear discussion around what we're suggesting. That's the way to put it.
One thing that I wanted to add to kind of building off of what Atul was saying about how challenging hiring has been, I think having that flexibility to either bring on an FTE or a consultant is great, but I also think that we should be considering in our budget kind of this whole new world that we're in, that we need to add recruitment costs onto any position, whether we're working with a company like Prothman or just having to advertise more. But I think that one thing we've seen is that those costs are a lot higher than we would have originally anticipated. And I think that we can really benefit from consultants, but we also are going to need to build the internal team too. So we're going to need to spend that time and money to get some other staff on in addition to the general manager. So just hiring is harder, and we need to account for that in our budget.
Yeah.
Can I make an observation too? Just having been in the marketplace for hiring locally and professionals, with our housing prices, it's becoming harder to recruit people to leave a home that they may have purchased somewhere else to buy here. The transactional costs alone could inhibit that. They may or may not have had the increase in their equity, or they're trying to enter in the market. You're getting into a professional can they buy a home? It's not necessarily for private business to always resolve the issue, but it is a factor in hiring and possibly retaining. Also, you're seeing more, at least in the private marketplace, more incentives for moving. Packages of signing bonuses or different things with an obligation, associated with the bonus that you have to stay a certain period of time or something. But you may need to expand your range in your budget or get creative depending on the number of positions, or have some contingencies.
Yeah, I think the another challenge, and I think you've really hit on it, Commissioner Grant, but the challenge is that we need to, and we've done that a couple of years ago. I laid out a timeline that went from, last year, 5 years forward, looking at several of the positions that we know where we expect that there'll be retirement. And so looking at best picture, can we hire someone to fill position A by this date? Well, what happens if we don't? So then we looked at, potentially using a consultant to provide those services, and having the flexibility both in budget, but also in terms of hiring. What happens if we don't get that person on, replacement? What's our contingency? And so we have to, that flexibility really is already provided with, with the general manager to hire, consultant, or to continue to try to bring on staff. I think the other thing that I think we need to, and Brian and I have had several discussions around that, and that is that we need to build that, what you've hit on, Commissioner Grant, is working with either, local Whatcom County educational systems or beyond, Skagit, Snohomish, looking at opportunities to partner with them to go, okay, what are your training programs? Can we look to, your university, community college, tech college, as a resource for graduates, and recognize that we may need to, and I know Commissioner Grant has brought that up to me several times, is that, maybe we can't fill that position with someone with all the qualifications and experience that we really feel that we need. Maybe we need to build that, overlapping of staff numbers, but bring someone in, a recent graduate, and build that. The problem with that is that, just like an internship on, social media, we need to have staff have time to basically build that internal program. So we're looking at all those options, but.
We need to budget for it, but we do have amazing educational resources in our community, and I think we could utilize them a lot more.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
John, go ahead.
We have an executive session in 3 minutes.
And lawyers are not cheap. That's part of our budget too. Yeah.
It is.
Is there more for this discussion? Steve?
No, and I would just encourage you to individually contact me, call me if you've got anything further. Again, we'll be bringing to you hopefully on the October 28th that first draft budget. So
Have fun, Annette.
So commissioners, if we're going to move the executive session, I'm going to estimate that this will be an hour. It could be longer to an hour and a half, but we're going to estimate an hour, and we'll come out in an hour if and give an update if we need to. And there is potential action afterwards, as we discussed earlier.
Great. So we'll be signing out, and then there's another link for us to sign back into.
That's correct. I emailed that to everybody already.
All right, thank you all. See you here back short, well, maybe in an hour.
Mike, if you're listening, we've ended the executive session, but we're going to come back at the 12:30 time that was on the slide.
Sounds good.
I just realized everyone watching me eat. I apologize for that.
Well, my tummy's growling quite a lot, so,
I should have turned off my video.
so
Yeah,
stop
you-
it.
you- Yeah, you were making me hungry.
Real excited, yogurt and granola.
Okay, should we get started? Is everybody here?
I'm here.
Mike, you want to stop screen sharing? There we go. Thank you.
Yep, sorry about that.
All right, let's get back to it. On our agenda still today, we have public comment and then and commissioner comments. I guess commissioner reports happen first. I'll go first. I reported on my one meeting with the advisory group already under the broadband update. So I really have nothing else to report on. Commissioners, any reports?
I gave all my updates under the broadband update.
Commissioner Murphy?
I have no per diems to report in the past, but will be attending WAPUDA Thursday and Friday. I think maybe the two of you will be sitting on a few of the committees. So anyhow, that's about it.
Thank you. So let's move on to public comment.
Can I just say one thing to Mike? I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to go to the WAPUDA meetings, just because of some scheduling stuff. So if you guys are going, can you take notes and share back at our next meeting?
Sure.
Thank you. I'm going to try to log on if it works out, but I'm still trying to figure it out. So thank you.
This is Rebecca. I see no one in attendees raising their hand to make a public comment.
Okay, great. So we'll close the public comment period and we had one item of business, which is regarding the California Creek grant that we added at the beginning of the meeting to our agenda. And that item is to reject the grant that was awarded by the Department of Ecology to the Whatcom PUD. And the reason for rejecting this grant is because we were not able to come to an agreement addressing the unexpected risks that the PUD would be incurring as part of doing the project.
I can't add any more than that, Commissioners. The action then would include a direction for staff, myself, and John to send a letter to Ecology acknowledging that action.
And that we look forward to working with them in the future.
Absolutely.
I will make that motion.
And I'll second.
There's a motion, a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, well, all those in favor, please signify by saying yes or aye.
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 The motion carries. Commissioners, is there anything else for the good of the order today?
Nice to see all of you.
Nice to see all of you, yeah.
Thank
Steve,
you all.
you don't mind me asking, how's the river?
I didn't check it this morning. Before we got the rain the last couple of days, it was continuing to drop. The last the last I looked at it on Friday before we got the rains, it was down in the 600 range. But the last few days of the rain that we got, I'm sure, we'll see a definite improvement, and they're predicting next week or this coming week, Friday, Saturday, to get significant rain.
So we may have hit our worst point this last week.
I believe we have, yes. Yeah. Yeah, they're actually predicting the potential of snow in the mountains on Saturday.
Well, knock on wood.
Yeah.